I tell everybody, including my good friends from Mended Hearts, that this is absolutely the best conference and everybody in pharma should go. So I know we just saw this, but I couldn't see. Who here is from a pharma or biotech company? Show of hands. Okay, so I think we need to go out and be advocates for this conference, because from my perspective, we need to get more of us here, because we get so much rich information from the actual patients, which is so important. And then there was a conversation that happened over the break in terms of the number of physicians that aren't here. So if everybody kind of takes that on as an evangelist moving forward to next year, it would be great to see this room kind of double year over year, and maybe we'll have to wind up in a bigger room. So today I'll be sharing with you a case study on Speak from the Heart. And last year I was here and I talked about Speak from the Heart. It's not the same talk for those of you that were here. We're really going to focus today on the importance of real patient stories, and it's been great because there's been a lot of conversation at this meeting about the role of real patient stories. And we're also going to focus on the importance of advocacy group partnerships. So two key questions we'll answer are why real patient stories and why advocacy group partnerships. I'll provide you with some background information, and then I'll invite my friends from Mended Hearts to join me on stage, and they'll provide their perspectives. So, by way of some background, back in 2008, we had a baseline hypothesis in the area that I focus in cardiovascular, that there's a substantial group of chronic angina patients that are dissatisfied with how they're doing, that could be mobilized to be more involved in their health care and ultimately prompt appropriate changes in treatment. I won't go into a big pathophysiology discussion, but chronic angina is a symptom of coronary artery disease. And so, show of hands, how many people here have someone in their family or know somebody that suffers from chronic angina? And that's actually surprising that there's so few, because believe it or not, according to the American Heart Association, there are 10 million patients in this country, people diagnosed with that condition. And every year, an additional 500,000 people are added to that number. I suspect one of the reasons you don't know about it, because I guarantee you do know somebody with this, is there's a lot of apathy among cardiologists about this because it's a symptom, it's not a disease. And so it's one of those things where, Seth said some great things yesterday. There was the passive dialogue dysfunction and different things like that. You've got this demographic of patients that views the cardiologist as God. Maybe this cardiologist saved their life when they had a heart attack. They don't feel empowered to question. The cardiologist doesn't spend a lot of time talking about it because many of these patients have other conditions that maybe take priority over this symptomatic condition. And so you wind up with this complete disconnect, apathy on part of the physician, and a huge number of patients that are suffering in silence. So our goal is to essentially give these people a voice. So we embarked on a very disciplined approach to build a patient marketing platform. This is a huge patient population. And last year we went through each of these phases and provided an overview of that process. Today's really focused in on phase one. And phase one was focused on answering three key questions. Where are there gaps? Because gaps provide opportunities. What are related therapies doing? And we don't have any direct competition. All of the medical therapies available for chronic angina today are old beta blockers, calcium channel blockers, long-acting nitrates that a lot of them have tolerability issues, so no branded competition. So we couldn't look at product X and say, what are they doing, what's working, what's not? We had to really go out and kind of figure this out on our own. Also, what are the must-haves? We were entering into this cardiovascular space with a lot of noise. What are the things that we need to have, even though there's no direct competition, just so that we can have share of voice in cardiovascular? And so here's what we found. First of all, a complete lack of unbranded education around chronic angina. And it's not surprising. We were the first new product on the market in over 20 years. Stents had come out, drug-eluted stents had come out, but most of the marketing for those was focused on the physician. So there wasn't a big focus on patient education. This provided us with an opportunity to really build a destination, a high-quality destination for this huge patient population with this big unmet need. The next thing we found out is across cardiovascular, there was a substantial library of video. And I honestly went into this process expecting video to be a nice-to-have. And very quickly, we discovered, even back in 2008, there was a lot of video content in the cardiovascular space. So very quickly, video became a must-have. And then looking at the competitive set in cardiovascular, many of the companies were actively engaged with key advocacy groups. So as I mentioned, there was a multi-phase project. We're not going to go through all of those steps. But what I can say is this competitive analysis, this first step that we took, directly informed Speak from the Heart. And this is speakfromtheheart.com. I showed a still shot of this last year, and I can tell you it's changed dramatically. We initially did not feature our patient video trailers on the homepage. We had them under this third tab at the top that said Hear from Others. And we did usability research. Let me take a step back. We launched the website in May of last year at the Mended Hearts National Meeting. And we did usability research at the end of the year, and patients who saw this trailer said, "Why is this hidden? This is so emotionally compelling. If I saw that as soon as I got to the website, I would want to see more." But they weren't even finding it. So we very quickly moved that to the front and center, and it's definitely had a substantial impact on engagement in the website. We saw people staying on the website for an additional 2 to 3 minutes on average after we've made this change to the website. So and that was on top of a 5 to 6 minute engagement rate before we did this. And as you can see, the patients feature very prominently in everything we do. They're front and center. Them and their real stories are front and center in everything that we do. So I'm really proud of the fact that we were recognized by industry. We swept the pharmaceutical category this year at the Webbies, winning the actual Webby, in addition to the People's Voice Award, which I really have to hand off to Donnette, who's going to join me in a minute. She was instrumental in rallying her Mended Hearts colleagues and forces online to have us. We actually were in 4th place, and within a couple of days, we were up in 2nd, and then we were in 1st, and we were up against a Flumist site called Pick Your Nose. So I'm happy to say we beat them. And we were also recognized as an honoree in the healthcare category. And the healthcare category captures sites like Everyday Health and Health Central and WebMD. So just to be recognized in that category is pretty meaningful. And we're also a finalist now in the Medical Marketing and Media Best Website category for 2011. So as I mentioned, the third key finding was the need to engage with key advocacy groups. And we were already working very closely with a nursing group called the Preventative Cardiovascular Nurses Association, but we weren't engaged with any patient groups. And so very quickly we identified Mended Hearts as a group that we should be working with. Now Mended Hearts has been instrumental, absolutely instrumental in the success of Speak from the Heart, without a doubt, on multiple fronts. First of all, they have this huge population of patients that we can reach out to directly to gain important insights, which is invaluable. I mean, you can do primary research, but to have this relationship with Mended Hearts where we can engage one-on-one with these patients and get that feedback, I can't tell you how great it's been. But the other more important part of this is we found Donnette. Donnette was a Mended Hearts volunteer, and Mended Hearts has a very cool way that they introduce themselves to industry where they bring patients to the meeting. And the patients go around the table and one by one tell their story and how they became a Mended Hearts volunteer, which without fail always starts with them being a patient in the hospital who was visited by a Mended Hearts volunteer, and once they were better, they wanted to give back, so they joined. So I saw Donnette, rushed back to Foster City, California, called Sean at Dramatic Health and said, "I found our first patient." And we had just started working together, and he kind of cautioned me that, you know, we usually do 10 phone screens to find the right fit, and I said, "Okay, call me crazy, do a phone screen, tell me I'm wrong." And he called me back and said, "This has never happened before, she's perfect." And it was through this relationship with Mended Hearts that we found Donnette. So with that, I'd like to introduce the beginning of Donnette's story. You'll have to go to speakfromtheheart.com to see the rest of it. Oh, there we go.
A Dramatic Health production.
Donnette. I live in Huntsville, Alabama. I'm married to my husband, Tom, and we have 2 children, Darren and Dana, and we have 2 great grandchildren. Super kids. Ty is 12 and Hannah is 8. Good girl.
We have 2 4-legged children as well. Well, actually 3, counting the cat. They're kind of company. You know, now that the children are gone, we enjoy it.
I'm a technical writer. I work at Redstone Arsenal. I've been there more years than I can count. Hopefully we'll retire somewhere in the future.
Met Donnette at work one day and things just went from there. Been very blessed to know her.
We've been married almost 30 years. It'll be 30 years in October. I like doing volunteer work. I guess that's my hobby, is doing volunteer work. I really enjoy it when I can help somebody.
So have you been feeling okay now?
I've been feeling okay since then. I really have.
That's fantastic.
She works almost a full schedule and then visits at the hospital with others and things. She has a big heart, there's no doubt.
My mother has a very warm, giving heart, a very big heart. Unfortunately, that heart also came with chronic angina.
I was born with a bicuspid valve. I knew from the time I was little that I had a problem. They had told me, you know, someday in the future, you're going to have surgery, but I just learned to deal with it. Then all of a sudden one day I started up the steps and I felt a burning sensation in my chest. It was like being out in the cold and you feel a burning sensation in your lungs. And it spread across my shoulders and I knew that was not right. I was afraid that it was a heart attack. And I went to see the doctor right away. He told me I didn't have a heart attack, which was good news. But he did diagnose me with chronic angina. I didn't really know what that was. And at the time, I was a little afraid to ask. He reassured me that it was not a heart attack and could be controlled. But, you know, being young, I push things like that away. If it goes away, fine. If it doesn't, I just continue. But, you know, in the back of your mind, it's always there that something's not right.
So one of the important things I forgot to mention is that how synergistic the mission of Mended Hearts is with what we're trying to accomplish with Speak from the Heart. This campaign is completely unbranded, and it's all about educating and empowering these patients to be more open and honest with their cardiologist, for them to really drive the discussion, because it's in many cases not being initiated by the cardiologist, so they can improve their quality of life. And we're accomplishing this in large part through the sharing of real patient stories, and I was thrilled to hear all of these references to the real patient stories. Seth said yesterday, patients with an illness want to seek out other patients with that illness to see how they deal with it and how they're doing. And that's exactly why this campaign is so powerful. Now, Mended Hearts' mission is to inspire hope in heart disease patients and their families. And they do this by having volunteers like Donnette go out and meet with patients in the hospital setting and walk them through what it's going to be like, because they've already been there. So this is, I mean, just the synergy between the two groups is amazing. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Donnette and Tim to the stage. Tim is the executive director of Mended Hearts. He's been there since 2005, and he's been in advocacy for almost 30 years, maybe 30 years by now. He's served for many years with the American Heart Association and also with the American Cancer Society. And Donnette, as you already kind of got an introduction, she was the founding president of the Huntsville Chapter 260 of Mended Hearts, and she has risen through the organization. When I first met Mended Hearts, she was the treasurer, and she recently became the national executive vice president. And she's being invited now, because Mended Hearts works closely with the American College of Cardiology, which is a physician group, on writing committees for guidelines. And so she's just an amazing, amazing person. And with that, help me welcome Donnette and Tim.
Thank you.
So I want to start with Donnette. From your perspective as both a patient and an advocate, what are your thoughts on using real patient stories? And then also, just for fun, what was it like to work with Dramatic Health and shoot your video?
Well, I'll start with the fun part of shooting the video. It was really interesting. I'm used to telling my story because I do it all the time, so that wasn't a problem. But you know, having a camera focused on you was a little bit different. And I mean, I've learned to like it. It's kind of nice. I was in fact, I was in my doctor's office recently, and they have the brochures and the pamphlets are all out for everybody to see. And there were some ladies standing behind me. We're at the checkout counter, and my husband says, "Oh, that looks like you," being the crazy person that he is. And he says, "Oh, that is you." And the lady behind says, "Oh my gosh, that is her." And they were going on and on about it. And she says, "Oh, could I have your autograph?" So that was pretty fun. But I think it's important for patients to tell their story, because you've lived it. You know what it's like to have the disease, or in my case, the surgery. So, you know, that gives you credibility. I know when I was first diagnosed and the nurses were trying to tell me, it was before my first surgery, and the nurses were trying to tell me, oh, it'll be okay, you're going to be fine, and my response was, show me your scar. I really want to see your scar. If you can tell me it's going to be okay, then I want to see. Of course, she couldn't, and then I was visited by a gentleman who had had surgery 2 years before. Made all the difference, made all the difference. So you know what it feels like? You can reassure them, you can give them hope that they're going to be better. Just looking at you. You're back to doing what you normally do, you look great, and that's an important part of them feeling like they can get through it as well.
Thank you. And Tim, when we launched Speak from the Heart, we'd actually met Mended Hearts for the very first time at the American Heart Association meeting in November of 2009. And then I came back and we decided to work with Donnette. And then we talked to Tim and he said, is there any way we can launch this at our meeting? And I thought, okay, well, when's your meeting? And he said, May. And I thought, okay, we have to build a website, we have to shoot videos, which I've never done before. And we had an agency meeting and I basically said to them, can we make this happen? And none of the agencies wanted to say no. And Dramatic Health said, we can do it. So then everybody was kind of peer pressured into making it happen, and we did. We made it happen. We produced two videos, Donnette and Ralph. Yeah. We launched at your meeting. And the Mended Hearts has a quarterly magazine called Heartbeat, and the summer issue that year was dedicated to the power of the patient voice. So can you provide some background on that? Because it covered different aspects of the patient voice.
Sure, and one thing I'll add to what Donnette has said, and we've heard at this meeting, is that I think the patient perspective and the patient involvement in our case, in terms of working with a company like Gilead or any other, is that we do provide an authenticity and a patient perspective that is just so important. And in our case, our patients go and visit other patients in the hospital on a daily basis. We average about 200,000 visits a year. And so that instant credibility that our patients have when they walk into the hospital room and see the other patient and know that patient knows that they've been in that bed, it's a powerful connection. So the Heartbeat article that Tina's referring to was, we did our cover story on the power of the patient voice. And there were really several methods to that madness. I think that one of the things we hope to achieve is to really validate for our patient community that they do have a voice and that it is powerful. So in the article, we looked at really three different aspects of the power of the patient voice. One is their own voice to each other, peer-to-peer. The other is the patient's individual voice in terms of their healthcare treatment and their voice in working with their healthcare community to ensure that they get the best care they can get. And our demographic skews a little older, so our generation, the generation of our patients, tends to be that generation that maybe doesn't always question or ask about their treatment. So we wanted to reinforce that message in the article. And then the third was just that as patients, they have, as a collective body, a very powerful voice in terms of advocacy and in the community and with influencers and policymakers. So that was sort of our approach. I have to say it's been one of the most popular issues, rivaled only by a more recent issue we did on the power of partnerships, where we talked about the power of collaboration, which is real big on our agenda.
And it's a good segue because I wanted to ask Donnette, knowing that it's more important today for patients to be prepared and to be empowered, as you're going out and coaching other patients who maybe aren't there yet, what are some of the things you do to kind of empower them to be less passive and more engaged in their healthcare management?
Right. Like Tim said, patients in my generation and older tend to put their physician on a pedestal, and they don't question. Whatever he says or she says is law, and they don't feel like they have the right to question what he says, even if they do have a question. So when I go into the hospital and visit with a patient, or we do internet visiting, when I answer an internet inquiry, I encourage them to make a list of questions before they go into the doctor and be sure that you get all those questions answered. And I have found out in my own right that it's mostly my fault. If I don't get those questions answered, or if I don't get the information that I need, it's because I didn't ask them. So I try to relay that to the patient so that they know it is okay for them to go in and talk with their doctor and ask questions and take a list and be sure their questions are answered before they walk out of the room, because it's too late then. But I enjoy going into the hospital and talking with them. It's a form of giving back for me. And I'm just so glad that things worked out well for me. I just 2 years ago had my 3rd open heart surgery. So I'm really glad to be here. But I enjoy going into the room, and in our training sessions, our visitors are trained to go in, what to say, what not to say, and we partner with our hospitals, so we deal with the HIPAA issue. We tell them in the training process that, one of the things is don't go in when you don't feel well. Or if you're just not right up to visiting, you're not going to do a patient any good if you're kind of down in the dumps, or if you just feel rotten or tired or whatever. Well, I've always worked, and I've been one of those visitors that had to visit in the afternoon after work. So I would be so tired. I would usually work. I retired a year ago, by the way. So I would usually go in after work after about 6 o'clock and be exhausted after working a 9 or 10 hour day, and I'd have to really talk to myself on the way to the hospital to get myself ready. And I would walk in, or before I walked into the room, I would psych myself up and put a smile on my face so I could be at my very best when I approached this patient. And when I walked in that door and saw that patient with that look that I knew all too well, with the fear in those eyes and the dread in that face, wow, it brought it all back, and I know how I felt when I was there. So I can talk with them, encourage them, answer any questions that they might have, and then they lose that fear look in their face, and then I walk out of that room and the smile on my face is not put on there, it's for real. And I feel like I've done something that day that was extremely important over and above what I did at my job. So that's why I do what I do. So that's why I think it's so important for the patients or for heart patients like me to go in and encourage patients who are about to have their surgery or their procedure. So that's why we do what we do at Mended Hearts.
That's great, and I just want to be cognizant of time. Real quick, key takeaway, and it could be about this presentation or the conference as a whole, because Donnette and Tim were not here last year. So one key thing that you think people should remember when they leave the conference, one key takeaway. We'll go with Tim first.
Okay, sure. So one is that I think that advocacy groups often have limited resources. That's just our reality. So working with a company like Gilead or Bristol Myers Squibb, who we also work with extensively, remains a viable way, I think, for us to get our message out, our mission-driven message, in an effective way. Now, we also have, we're very careful. We have corporate relations guidelines and firewalls to avoid the, the perception of endorsement of a branded product, and most of our campaigns are unbranded anyway. But I think it's a very viable and important way for patient groups to work with industry.
Great. And just in closing, for all of my pharma colleagues out there, the one question you should ask yourself when you leave here today is, have you identified the right groups that you should be working with? And are you really leveraging those relationships? It's not enough to just kind of give the corporate sponsorship. I mean, you can find ways to partner with these groups in meaningful, mutually beneficial ways, as evidenced by our relationship with Mended Hearts. So I'll challenge you to go out there and look for those relationships and do whatever it takes. You may have to work through public affairs or other avenues, but it's worth it. You will not regret that, and it's made a huge difference. I mean, I'm so much more passionate about the work I do now because of the real patients I interact with. So thank you.